Morning and welcome to this Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Alex Hall. I'm Vice Chairman of this committee and I will be your Chairman for this meeting. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcasted live via the County Council's website, and with this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the public watching this live. I would like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park until further instructions are issued. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of this meeting. Requests to speak will be collated by the Scrutiny Officer, Chiara. We will now move on to the formal agenda. Do we have any apologies, Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Eddie Strengle, for whom we've subbed Councillor Nice here.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Moving on to item 3 of the agenda, minutes of the meeting of the committee on the 7th of March 2022. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Please turn to pages 5 to 12 of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer? Thank you. A seconder? Thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. I think that was unanimous, wasn't it? So, but any against? Oh, sorry, was you an abstention? Yeah. And Councillor Sear. Okay, thank you. Item 4 of the agenda, announcements by the chairman, executive councillors and lead officers. I have no announcements this morning. We have a lighter agenda today with one pre-decision scrutiny item to take. May I remind you all of the importance of succinct questions and contributions. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome Mr. David Matthews, who is attending this meeting online and will have the opportunity to address members of this committee as part of item 5 of the street lighting policy updates. Executive councillor announcements. Are there any announcements from Councillor Richard Davis, Executive Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT, or Councillor Cleo Perriton Williams?
No, there are no announcements. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Senior officer, before I ask about the officer announcements, I would like to welcome and introduce to members Jonathan Evans, who has been appointed as the Head of Highways, Client and Contractual Management Services. Jonathan will please indicate whether you have any announcements to make on behalf of Karen Kassar, who has sent her apologies for this meeting.
No announcements today, please, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And thank you. We'll now move on to the next item, which is the item 5, the street lighting policy updates. This pre-decision scrutiny report was published on the 21st of April 2022. This item invites the committee to consider and comment on a report which proposes updates to the street lighting policy, including options and a recommendation for lighting on new developments prior to a decision being taken by the Executive Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT between the 25th of April and the 3rd of May 2022. Our views will be collated by the Scrutiny Officer, Chiara, and will be reported to the Executive Councillor. In terms of our actions, the committee is invited to consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendations to the Executive Councillor as set out on page 3 of the supplementary report, and to agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillor in relation to this item. Before we start with this item, I would like to set out on how this item will be handled, as we have an external speaker as stated in my announcements. The running order for this item will be as follows. The report will be presented by John Monk, Head of Design and Services, and that will be via Teams. And then I will invite Mr. Matthews to address the committee and to express his views on this subject for a maximum of 3 minutes. Mr. Matthews is attending via Teams, and I would like to ask him, when invited, to switch on his camera and microphone, and when he is finished, to switch off his camera and microphone. There will then be opportunity for committee members to ask any clarifying questions that John Monk and colleagues may wish to answer. This will then be followed by a debate by the committee, who will consider and comment on the report and highlight any recommendations or further actions for consideration by the Executive Councillor. If you're ready, Chiara, may we proceed with the guest speaker? No, over to sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and we will start with John Monk. Thank you. John, are you ready?
I am indeed. Thank you, Chairman. So, as the Chairman's already said, the report to this committee is effectively the covering report for the report to the Executive Councillor, and it's really this latter report that I will be talking through for this committee to consider. So the report is included as a supplement to the pack, and I'm going to be starting by reviewing some of the details on page 4, the background section, and then working through the report from there. So the current street lighting policy had its infancy in around 2016-17 when we implemented the street lighting transformation project. And as an integral part of that, there is a hierarchy of street lighting provision with the aim of providing a sustainable network where energy consumption is managed to a minimum. That hierarchy goes through in order of consideration: complete removal, switching off, part night lighting, dimmed lighting, and full lighting. And we're not proposing to change that hierarchy as part of this policy update. At the time, the funding made available for the transformation project allowed us to convert around 42,000 lights to part night operation, 18,000 to be converted to LED, and there were around 850 which were switched off completely at the time. Those numbers were really limited by the funding which was made available at the time. I've not included the figure in the report, but that was actually £6.4 million of county council capital which was used to do that project. There was a subsequent 2018 scrutiny review into the impact of part night lighting. As a result of that review, there was no definite link made between part night lighting and crime, and the police were consulted as part of that review. However, the outcome was that precept raising councils in Lincolnshire, or other precept raising councils in Lincolnshire, should be allowed to fund a conversion of otherwise part night lit lights to operate all night. However, since the policy was changed to allow for that to happen in 2019, only 4 lights in Pinchbeck have been converted to all night operation through that process. And then there's just 1 outstanding formal inquiry from a parish council in relation to a potential further 3 lights. I think it's worth noting, as I have in the report, that due to the street lighting transformation project, energy consumption for the county has reduced from 22.9 million kilowatts per hour in 2015-16 to 8.6 in 21-22. And that converts at current energy prices as a reduction from 4.13 million to 1.55 million, so considerable a saving of 2.58 million per annum as a result, direct result of the actions taken 6 years ago in terms of current savings. It is worth noting that energy costs, as I'm sure we are all aware, are only increasing. And we, through the purchasing processes that we make as county council, we do now know that energy costs across the board for the county council, including for street lighting, are going to increase by 67% on the 1st of October this calendar year. In the main, the currently proposed updates to the policy they're relatively minor, bringing technical updates and text updates and some clarifications. The one exception is the significant change in policy position relating to the provision of lighting on new developments, also known as Section 38 roads. This is something that this committee had asked to be reported back on with some options at one of your previous meetings, partly driven by there's an increasing momentum amongst developers for new developments to be lit, not so much for highway purposes, which is where lighting has to meet requirements set out by British standards, but really for placemaking or footway only purposes. So really creating the right, the atmosphere, if you like, that the developer and planners are looking to create on new developments. 5 options have been put together, and I'll run through those shortly. A couple of things before I do run through those. One is that to note that in all cases, if permanent obstructions such as traffic calming features, which I have to say are fairly unusual on new developments these days, but if any permanent obstructions such as those are included in the development, the design of the development, then all night lighting would automatically required, just as it would be now. Also, there is the slight issue that any options where no street lighting is the outcome, it should be noted that a speed limit order would be likely to be required on adoption of the development road. This is because the 30-mile-an-hour limit that we're all used to on most development roads automatically exists within the Road Traffic Regulations Act because it comes with a system of street lighting. Of course, if we don't put any street lighting in, then that section of the Road Traffic Regulation Act doesn't apply, and so a speed limit order would be needed. Having had an exchange, though, with the relevant highways officers, we think that there's minimal risk that any such order would be unsuccessful. But we would need to develop a process to ensure that that's done in a timely fashion. So turning on to the 5 options that we've put forward in relation to lighting on new roads. So option 1 is fairly much the closest to the status quo, so that the policy would state that Section 38 would be part night lit for highway purposes. But that, and this is the slight change to where we say at the moment, if other lighting is provided, which we currently don't allow for, then adoption arrangements would need to be made with other lighting authorities, such as parishes or districts. This option would not really generally move forward our position and priorities in terms of carbon management or minimising future maintenance liabilities, but it does introduce a bit more leeway or alternative for planners and developers to consider when looking at the use of non-highway related public lighting. Option 2 would be quite a stark choice, I think, which is in essence to say there is no street lighting at all for highway purposes, and with no other provision by us of any other options, in as much as if any other lighting is provided, then adoption would need to be made with other lighting authorities. And for this, it's worth noting that whilst the County Council is a lighting authority, our prime need for lighting is for highway purposes. Parish and district authorities are able to be lighting authorities for such purposes as footway lighting, or what I'm referring to as placemaking lighting. Again, this would meet the requirements of the hierarchy of provision set out in the policy. It would minimise contributions to future carbon emissions from our own assets and would also manage future maintenance liabilities. It would place the adoption of any non-highway public lighting as a matter for other authorities, including districts and parishes. It would be a step change from the current expectation that new developments would be lit with highway lighting, as it does say that there would be no street lighting as the starting point. Option 3 is very similar to option 2, other than it then introduces the option for a developer or planner to require or decide to put in part night street lighting as opposed to no street lighting. In that instance, though, because our starting point would be no street lighting, the part night lighting would be adopted only with a commuted sum for future maintenance. So that's a significant change from our current stance. And again, if any other lighting, such as footway lighting or placemaking lighting, was provided, then that would have to be again adopted by, for example, the parish or district council. Option 4 extends that a bit further and gives then the developers, planners options to provide all night lighting as an alternative to part night lighting. Again, though, because our starting point would be no street lighting, if they did want to provide part night lighting or all night lighting, that would again be required to be to our standards and would be adopted only through the provision of a commuted sum from the developer. And again, if other lighting such as placemaking or footway lighting was provided, they'd have to arrange for adoption arrangements with other lighting authorities such as the parish or district. This brings us on to option 5, which is the recommended option, which is that our starting point again is no street lighting. However, an option for non-highway lighting, so again footway or placemaking type lighting to be provided, and that we would adopt that footway or placemaking lighting with a commuted sum on the proviso that it's designed and implemented to a set of standards and styles that we would set out in a new Annex 6 to the street lighting policy. Note that because we're not yet going down this route as a definite, we've yet to prepare Annex 6, but we think that we could prepare that fairly quickly so that we could implement the policy change within a fair timescale. This option maintains the County Council's priorities in a similar way to the no street lighting option at all, but it does obviously provide that increased choice for planners and developers to provide non-highway lighting, so giving them a choice for other public lighting options. It is a step change still from the current expectation that all new developments are lit to highway standards, but the offer to adopt non-highway lighting for a commuted sum, by providing that, it's likely that some lighting will be provided on most developments and in a manner which actually fits the current placemaking agenda. On the note of that, these options and these policy changes have been discussed and agreed along with our development management team in the growth team as well. So this is not just a highway matter, it is a development management matter, and they're fully behind the options put forward and the recommendation. A final thing which this paper covers is that when the current policy and its annexes were introduced, it was agreed that all the annexes would be revised and updated as necessary by officers. The one exception to that was Annex 2, which lists exemptions, situations which meet as exemptions to part night lighting. And it's proposed there is one additional exemption added to the current list in there, which should allow a more reactive response to formal requests from the police. So that's not ad hoc requests from individual police officers, but formal requests such as we have received on 1 or 2 occasions since part night lighting was introduced, and they would be tied to specific police operations for predetermined periods of time, where we would go in and turn on all night lights in particular specific locations to assist with a police operation. So that, I think, concludes my presentation of the paper, and I shall hand back to the Chairman.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Mr. Matthews, you have 3 minutes. Over to you.
I think you may still be on mute, Mr. Matthews.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. I've just going to turn our volume up a second.
Right, I can see nothing except me on my screen. I start now then. In my 40 years as a design engineer and consultant, this is the worst design I have ever seen. The first requirement of any design is that it is safe. In the case of this one, as safe as the design it replaces. It's obviously not. When a design may not be safe, particularly if someone gets hurt or even worse, killed, the design will be investigated by the Health and Safety Executive. Fines and even prison have been known to result. The design saves electricity, but not CO2 during the small hours when the supplier should make a lower charge to get rid of the electricity. This is excess electricity.
Chairman,
Sorry.
sorry to interrupt. We can't
Yeah,
hear at all.
Yeah, sorry. Can we just pause a moment just to
I'm afraid our volume is up to the maximum. Mr. Matthews, I may have to ask you to project to the best of your abilities.
Sorry, I've been stopped. What happens?
We can't hear you too well on our end. Maybe if you'd like to begin again and do your best to project into the microphone.
You feel I've got it written down, isn't it? In my 40 years as a design engineer and consultant, this is the worst design I have ever seen. The first requirement of any design is that it is safe. In the case of this one, as safe as the design it replaces, it is obviously not. When the design may not be safe, particularly if someone gets hurt or even worse, killed, the design will be investigated by the Health and Safety Executives. Fines and even prison have been known to result. The design saves electricity, but not CO2 during the small hours when the supplier should make a lower charge to get rid of his excess electricity. It must increase the council liability insurance premiums. They only consider risk. When the design was voted on by the full council, it was known to the electrical engineers such as myself that the lamps had already been made obsolete by government legislation. Replacements like for like would not be possible. The then CEO wanted something to show the customers that he was not getting a big enough grant from the government. He found the cash to pay for the installation, 10 times the expected cost of the annual saved cost of electricity at that time. He had his way and upset the customers. The design replaced the standard dawn to dusk switch with one that added the added feature of a very erratic on-off midnight to 6 a.m. switching. The outside my property is sometimes on at 2 a.m. Not easy to find. Some wholesalers were very pleased to offload them to the council. The existing lamps are coming to the end of their life now. 95% can be expected to last 3 years from installation. There is no choice for the council. It's already having to install LED lights. Freedom of Information request confirms that on my estate they used exactly half the electricity used by the original lamps. The biggest cost of running a lighting system is not electricity, not even with the prices going up, but maintenance. The LEDs can be expected to last 10 times as long as those they replace, maybe 30 years. Fit and forget, but the new switches have no data sheet, so nobody knows their expected erratic life. Why risk action from the Health and Safety Executive? Why put customers' lives at risk? Why not just return to the system to the original, but with LED lights? Save on electricity, save on maintenance, please the customers, save the nightmare for the paramedics who came around to see my wife the other week at 2 a.m. Thank you very much, gentlemen and ladies, if there's any. You've heard everything?
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthews. We will now collate any questions for you, to you. Any members?
Councillor Dyer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I do have a couple of questions, but I'd just be interested
May I
to.
ask before you go any further, because of the communications I've got, if you don't speak slowly, I'm a bit deaf, and as also the transmission isn't very good.
Mr. Matthews,
Okay.
if I may ask you to mute your microphone whilst the question is being asked so that you get better sound. And once you're asked to come back in, please reopen your microphone. Thank you very much. Councillor Dyer?
Thank you, Chairman. I do have a question on the substantive, but I'd just be interested to know whether there's an officer response on what Mr. Matthews has just put to committee.
John, are you with us?
Yes, I am. We've had substantial correspondence over the last number of years at officer level with Mr. Matthews addressing the majority of his concerns, and he's chosen to make this representation to this committee in the way that he has this morning. So we could go into considerable detail about technical issues, but also affordability issues. But it's much of which we've already covered with Mr. Matthews in previous email exchanges. I'm happy to expand for the committee, though, if you wish, Councillor Dyer.
Thank you, John. Councillor Dyer?
I think it would probably be appreciated for committee if you were just able to briefly explain it from your point of view, please.
Yep, certainly. In terms of the safety issues, park night lighting safety issues were considered as the scrutiny review in 2018. In addition, park night lighting, which I think is the main issue that Mr. Matthews has, is implemented right across the country. We are by no means alone. In fact, I think the minority of authorities now have not implemented park night lighting in some form. So the safety issues and the HSE investigation that he's referred to, I'm absolutely certain that if the HSE had their concerns about it as well, that they would be writing to us with their concerns. I'm not quite certain that I understand the issues between no carbon savings being made when we've, as stated in the paper, we've made savings of several million kilowatt hours. In relation to the ideal of moving everything to LED, yes, ideally we would have done that. We would have loved to have done that. It's simply a case of affordability. It's the difference between capital money in order to do that change when compared with revenue. And we had considerable issues, as members will be aware, with coming out of austerity in 2016-17, when we simply did not have that revenue, and we needed to make those revenue savings very quickly. So, you know, I do agree with Mr. Matthews that in an ideal world we would have converted everything to LED, but we simply could not afford to. If we were now to choose to convert to LED in one fell swoop, again, we simply cannot afford to. We are in the middle of a 6-year programme now into year 4 of converting low pressure sodium lights to LED. That's funded by interest-free Salix loans from the National Salix Fund. And the possibility of converting existing lights back to all-night operation, that would also be prohibitively expensive, because we would have to attend each individual light again and change the photo cell. Members will remember that in 2016-17, when we did the conversion to part night lighting, we actually effectively paused all routine maintenance other than emergency fault responses in order to carry out the programme, because it is a very labour intensive and intense exercise to go around that many thousands of streetlights and implement changes like that. I think I've addressed the key issues that Mr. Matthews has raised this morning.
Thank you. Are there any further questions about the report? Councillor Dyer.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that response. Just a couple more questions from me, please. I know the government are currently looking into the wider policy area. I think it's been dubbed fleasehold, which is where new estates, where there's a public green space and residents who hold the freehold for properties have to pay a community charge for the upkeep of green spaces. Most of the time it's grass cutting and maintaining play equipment, but sometimes within those spaces that are already present, there are this sort of residential placemaking lighting. And I know it's an issue in some areas of Lincoln. So for these estates, and a lot of them haven't been adopted by district or the district councils or the county council, what would our adoption policy be for these lights that are already in place? Or would it just mean that they can't be adopted because those lights wouldn't be suitable in accordance with the option 5 policy that's being put forward to us today? And my second question as well, I know obviously the comment in the report that precepting authorities can request to fund the lighting for placemaking purposes. Would that be able to be extended to larger organisations or businesses, for instance, that, you know, are down a long country lane and they might want it lit going to their premises, or in Lincoln, for instance, where there's, you know, the university, for instance, who may wish for some street lights within their vicinity to be lit? Is there a mechanism where large organisations could either, you know, be in dialogue with either district or county councils to try and, if they wish to light outside of our policy? Just be appreciated if you could answer those couple of points, please. Thanks.
Yeah, of course, taking those in turn then. In relation to any existing arrangements for any existing lighting, they will not be changed by any change in policy. Worth saying though that we did consider options around encouraging management companies, which do exist on quite a lot of new developments these days in relation to, as you described, public open spaces, or quite often some of the sort of drainage issues on new developments. We did consider that as an option. However, one of the issues there is that sooner or later, on one or a number of developments, those companies will disappear, go into receivership, or just fold, or people will forget about them. And because the lighting is on highway, it would almost certainly just simply to revert to us as a matter of course, because as the highway authority, we're ultimately the last, the provider of last resort. So I hope that explains that situation. In relation to large organisations wanting to promote conversion to all night, we are happy for them to promote that. One of the reasons we did say, though, that we wanted all requests to go through the precept raising authorities is because they are the organisations, they are the authorities that represent all the people affected, not just that single organisation. So the decision as to whether to take forward a proposal from a large organisation would go through the relevant parish or district. So it may be that a particular factory, for example, might promote it and ask the parish. They could even pay the parish the sufficient funds, but then the decision has to be taken by the local representatives of the general population.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a general remark that when it's page 5, we've got 2.58 million savings. The additional saving target for turning the lights off was 1.7 million. Therefore, the authority are 800,000 in front of the saving target. When I go around my division, the street lighting is always in the top 3 residents' concern. The conclusion is the residents, along with other areas, would like requesting the lights turned on between 12 and 6. Therefore, I didn't support the original policy and or any amendments to that said policy. Thank you.
I'd be happy to respond to that if you wish, Chairman.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. excuse me. So maybe it's a little bit of bad choice of words. That difference in what I've termed as saving in the report perhaps is not so much a saving as a cost we have not incurred. In as much as that 800,000 is purely down to the rises in energy costs since we implemented the street lighting transformation project. So it's money we've not had to spend rather than, if you like, a cashable saving.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. You said earlier on that the original change to this policy, that the police were consulted and said they had no concerns. Do you have any figures pre-lights turning off for safety concerns, accidents, and do you have any post-lights turn off? Has there been any increase? I know that a lot of residents in my area, obviously South Holland is heavily has a lot of factories with people going to and from work at all hours of the days. A lot of people are walking down these streets at night, clutching alarms and keys. And I'm not comfortable with this policy that we're going to have no lights. I don't think I could support that.
Yes, when we implemented the street lighting transformation project back in 2016-17, we worked closely with the Lincolnshire Community Safety Partnership in order to determine areas of, and I use the term carefully here, relatively high crime areas, and I'm using that term carefully because Lincolnshire in general, if you speak to Lincolnshire police or police nationally, is one of the safest areas in the country to live in. So a high crime area in Lincolnshire is not necessarily high crime when it's looked at across the country. So that is one of the exemptions in Annex 2 to the policy. The second thing is that when we carried out, or rather when your colleagues carried out the scrutiny review in 2018, they were provided again with data from the Lincolnshire Community Safety Partnership and from the police in terms of data from immediately prior to the implementation of park night lighting in 2016-17 and changes up until the scrutiny review considered it in 2018. And in some areas, yes, crime had gone up, but in a number of areas, crime had actually gone down as well. So there was no demonstrable link able to be made as a result of that. And police made a full commitment in response to the scrutiny review that if and when even they had any concerns about the impact of the actual impact of park night lighting on crime, they would come and talk to us at a corporate level. That hasn't happened, other than, as I referred to earlier, on the odd individual situation in relation to an individual police operation. There was something else I was going to add to that. Apologies, it's gone out of my slightly fuzzy head. I'm rather full of COVID at the moment, I'm afraid, which is why I'm not with you in the chamber today, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. Two things. Fear of crime. I think we can park that one. Certainly, it rates very, very high in Boston, which I represent part of, but in fact, it's not a high crime area compared with other parts of the county even. What does concern me is the fact that I represent the area which includes the main industrial park of the borough, namely the Riverside Marsh Lane Industrial Estate. And there are companies there who have a shift change at 4 a.m. and yet street lighting is off till 6 a.m. This is the one thing that I have received representation on earlier, and I regret that I haven't followed it up since I received these papers. I've not been well for a couple of days. Have you any comment about that, whether this is something that has a company approached you, or is it something that can be considered? It's just those people, because they walk. We have a large number of people who walk to work. Probably they walk a mile or so, but it's not a particularly easy walk. There's a lot of obstructions down one particular road where they walk. So I'd be interested to know your comment, please.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Austin, because the fear of crime was actually the other matter I was going to touch on in my previous response. In as much as the scrutiny review did conclude amongst in its report that the main issue with park night lighting was not actual crime, but was fear of crime. But I think I'd refer you, Councillor Austin, back to my previous response in relation to larger organisations, potentially commercial operations or factories, who have concerns about park night lighting in the vicinity of their premises and operations, that they can approach and even offer to pay through the parish and district councils for them as precept raising authorities to have conversion to all night lighting. We did discuss, we have over the last few years, we have had one or two individual approaches from such organisations, and we've always pointed them to the relevant district or parish council to have those conversations, and they've never come back, if you like, through the system back to us. One of the issues there is with that is where do you stop and start the conversion to all night lighting, because the number of individuals who might be walking to that operation, they are likely to be coming from a number of different directions, and there will be, being slightly facetious here, you can't sort of light to an individual's home who might be walking to the particular place of business. Otherwise you end up almost effectively reversing the entire policy in the first place. So it is something we've considered. It is conversation we've had with some large operators, and in line with the policy as it was amended in January 2019, we've pushed we've pointed them back to discussions with the relevant parish or district council or town council or other precept raising authority to have the discussions with them.
Thank you, Councillor Sear.
Now, I like to ask question. I represent town and rural area. It come up to my attention. I have a lot of quiet complaint. Okay, past lighting, you switch it off, suddenly hour, but we have a few incidents, like in town where I represent. It's elderly people phone for ambulance on urgent because no light. The ambulance cannot find the address. Okay, and some elderly, well, a lot where I am is retired, a rural area, and I don't think it's how you say it's not very high on Berkeley. It's quite a lot where I live in. So I think I'm very concerned. And how you get the target? Do you go around and ask people what they think? So I want to know. So I don't think I will support no park lighting or no lighting to talk. I know I is sitting on somebody else, but good job I came to. Thank you.
In relation to the ambulance service and to be honest, other emergency services finding individual addresses, that's something that was looked at as part of the scrutiny review into the impact of park night lighting that was undertaken in 2018. And the views of the emergency services, all the emergency services were sought as part of that. There were two issues that they mainly came at in terms of that. One was that Lincolnshire being the large rural county that it is, there are a lot of instances where the emergency services attend properties where there is no street lighting at all in any case, which links into the second one, which is crews are well prepared in general for locating properties in the absence of streetlights in any case, with their own not just sat navs, etc., but lights and torches, etc., that they're used to finding those sorts of properties. In relation to crime statistics, we, as I said earlier, we relied entirely on the Lincolnshire Community Safety Partnership and the police for their input into providing those statistics, and also their interpretation of what those statistics meant. So it's not something that we've taken in isolation and made a decision on. We've taken the advice from the experts as to the impacts of park night lighting on crime. And as I said earlier, there was no discernible direct impact, but there is an impact on the perception of crime, certainly.
Councillor Sear.
Well, Pastor, I am in Mablethorpe, that on East Coast, not your own rural area, and the people now in East Coast complain about this service. So not your own people live in a country lane, but these like in town, on back, not in the town center, on other sides of the town. You know, even some bungalow near onto the town center. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to start off by saying, well, Mr. Matthews is one of my constituents, and I know he's very passionate about this subject of getting the lights switched on back to all night lighting, and we've had many exchanges between himself and myself and the office of the council, as John Monk has outlined. But I do feel that we've been very thorough with this process over the years, with the park night lighting review and the scrutiny review that was carried out in 2018 as well. And so I think we've been through all the right processes and everything, and considered things really thoroughly, and that's, you know, why we are where we are today with park night lighting and everything. So I think as far as that's concerned, I'm going to leave that, and I'm sort of happy. I know it'd be very nice to have the lights on all night, but is it absolutely necessary when most people are in bed and asleep? Now, at the moment, I've got one of my parishes which are going on to something slightly different, who's been asking about if it would be possible for them to pay in some way to have some of these lights that were switched off for highways reasons, if they would have them switched back on again for footway lighting reasons, which is, and they have emailed in to the council and John Monk's got a copy of that, and I'm just I thought I would mention that today, because we haven't actually got a process in our policy at the moment, or a mechanism in our policy at the moment which allows that to happen, either them to take them over completely and run them themselves as a parish, as a parish's own lighting system, or to pay us, as some people do, as to pay us to the running costs of the lights, to bring them back up to spec and to pay the running costs. And we're talking in here about some of the additions to the policy of commuted sums being paid, etc. And parishes at the moment can pay the council to have lights converted from part night to whole night lighting. So I just wondered if we could explore going forward the possibility of having a mechanism in the policy to allow that to happen, to allow parishes to gets these lights switched back on again and pay for them for footway purposes, if they can be switched back on for footway lighting purposes. I don't know if John would like to comment on that, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Brooks. As you said, that's correspondence I'm aware of, and we've been looking at within the street lighting team. It's certainly something I can have a conversation with the executive councillor about, in terms of it's something, whether it's something he would support, in including something in relation to the revised policy for that. What I would say is that this would only specifically relate to the approximately 850 lights that we switched off completely as part of the street lighting transformation project, and the number of those which are physically remaining on the highway is diminishing year on year as we find the opportunity, time and money in order to actually remove those. So the ones in question that Councillor Brooks is talking about, they happen to be amongst those which are remaining. It's certainly something I can talk to the executive councillor about, in terms of whether it's something he would support, or it may be that because of that diminishing number, it's something we deal with on a case by case basis outside of the normal policy.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry to come back again. I appreciate that we need to save money, but the comments I've just heard was that we're okay to live with fear of crime as long as we save a few quid, and I'm not on board with that. The options we're looking at now, option 5, is no street lights. That's not part lights, that's no street lights, and I'm not on board with that. Option 1 is where we are currently, which I'm not on board with, but better than option 5. I'd support option 1, but not 5.
In relation to the fear of crime issue, the Lincolnshire Community Safety Partnership did take away a number of actions to implement themselves as a result of the scrutiny review, which was undertaken in 2018. And you'd have to, I think, talk to them in terms of how they've managed that. In relation to reducing the perception of crime and the fear of crime there. And one of the reasons that we've gone for, or we are suggesting option 5, is because there is a distinct move from both planners and developers that they themselves actually want to go away on new developments, particularly from, if you like, traditional street lighting, which I would refer to as highway lighting, to more like placemaking and footway lighting, more lower level, a slightly different light distribution, more bollard style lighting, which actually isn't predominantly there for highway safety, highway lighting. It's there for creating, as I referred to earlier, more of a feeling of place, an atmosphere, and an ambiance. So one of the reasons we wanted to go down option 5 is because it creates that opportunity for developers to provide that, which actually the message we're getting through our development and management colleagues is predominantly that is what they want to provide in any case, even though it is not actually highway lighting, which is why we've gone down that option as a recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Dyer.
Chairman, can I formally propose that committee votes on option 5?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Do we have any further questions before I move on? No. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for everyone for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of the item. And I move that the committee endorses this report and recommendations as set out on page 3 of the supplementary report, and that our comments as captured are shared with the Executive Councillor for his decision on this item between the 25th of April to the 3rd of May 2022. We endorse option 5, no street lighting, with a note for a non-highway lighting with a with a commuted sum to be provided alongside with a set of standards to be submitted as part of Annex 6. Do I have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Rawlins, thank you. We will now vote on this item. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Okay, any abstentions? No. Oh. Vote for Tom. Okay, thank you. That is carried. I would like to thank Mr. Matthews for his attendance and contribution. Mr. Matthews, you may now leave this session. However, you are welcome to continue observing the meeting through the link to the live session that has been that you have been provided with. And thank you, John, and I hope you get well soon.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Moving on to item 6 of the agenda, performance report Q3. This item can be found on pages 13 to 90 of the agenda pack and sets out the performance of the highway service, including the major highway schemes update, Lincolnshire Highways performance report and transport complaints report. The item will be presented by Jonathan Evans, Head of Highway Services. In terms of our actions, the committee is invited to consider and comment on the detail of the performance contained in the report and recommend any changes or actions to the executive member for Highways, Transport and IT. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Chairman. So for this session, I'm just going to run through the performance report. And as the Chairman has just outlined, this runs through the overarching highway service, including the major schemes, quarterly performance, and the key contracts, which are the highway works, traffic signals, and professional services contracts. And I've also put in there some key information for you to discuss further today. So I'll start off on item number 2, which is the major highway schemes update. The authority currently has 3 major highway schemes that are currently in progress. They are the Grantham Southern Relief Road. Phase 1 of that works was completed a couple of years ago. Phase 2 is nearing completion and is due to open later this year. And Phase 3, which is the largest element of the works, is currently on site at the moment. And there's lots of works going on there in terms of piling, with the viaduct coming up in the next few months. So it's a critical phase of work for Lincolnshire County Council. The other major scheme, which is currently on site at the moment, is Spalding Western Relief Road. Work started in January 2022. With a projected end date of 2023. And again, obviously with these types of works, construction, there are risks and delays along the way, but that's where we're currently projecting. The final major scheme that we've got underway at the moment or working on is the North Highcombe Relief Road. That went for a key decision with the executive a couple of weeks ago, and the decision was made to award or appoint Balfour Beatty as a design and build contractor. And those works are due to commence in 2025 with an indicative range of somewhere between 179 million to 212 million. Within the report, in the Appendix A, there's also a number of other smaller schemes we've got underway. They're Roman Bank Skegness, Lincolnshire Coastal Highway schemes, the Levelling Up Fund projects, which are looking at junction capacity and improvements around the network. And that's trying to get the connectivity to in between the sort of communities where they're working and travelling to. We've also got the A17 Heckington Dual Scheme and the Red Lion Square at Stamford. So I'll move on now to the actual Highways Lincolnshire Term Service Contract update, and that's the performance report contained in section 3.1. So the performance report is reported quarterly, and I'm just going to talk through some of the key findings this time. A copy of the actual full report is contained within Appendix B, and that covers the period from October to December 2021. So the Alliance partners managed to achieve their targets for Q3, and the results for each one I'll just outline now. So the Highway Works Term Service Contract, and that's the Balfour Beatty works that you're doing, that we're doing day in, day out. The performance for Q3 was 57%. That was a slight drop from 63% in Q2, and that related to drainage cleansing and some of the street lighting measures we've got on the contract. The next one is the professional services contract, which we've got WSP working for us for. They scored 79.8%. That's a slight improvement from where we were in Q2 at 74%. Traffic signals term service contract with Colas remains static at 88% at a very high level of performance. And then we also manage and monitor ourselves as a client. So whilst we are talking about our external partners there, we also as a highway service monitor ourselves to try and demonstrate value for money. The client performance indicators are currently at 66%, and they've remained static from Q2 also. Across those PIs, they're contract-specific ones. We have a set of key performance indicators, which are sort of looking at the overarching and improvement services for the whole highway service. The KPIs for this quarter were 78%, and that was a drop of 1% from Q2, which was 79. So the scores themselves sort of, tracking and moving over time. At the performance working group, we monitor and identify poor performance and areas that we can improve. And just to outline the committee today, we've got a number of improvement plans in place for certain areas of the contract. So they are the Highway Works contract, which is PI3, which relates to the reactive faults, generally your pothole response times. We've got an improvement plan for that at the moment. We've got a scheduling hub that's being introduced to the north and south of the county that Balfour Beatty are running. We're looking at the terms and conditions of the operatives. I think nationally there's been the construction sector is, I would say, booming at the moment, and there's a lot of it's difficulty to get resource onto the contract. So they've looked at the terms and conditions of the pay to try and retain those operatives. Resource levels in itself, that's been a challenge for the Balfour Beatty at the moment, trying to hold on to good staff. There's a lot of work within Lincolnshire and nationally, so that's just another challenge that we're trying to deal with. And then we're looking at whether we can do some more additional hours at the start and end of the day, what we call a twilight hours, and then overtime at weekends. The next item on the improvement plan that we're working on at the moment is PI number 8, which is street lighting service standard. Over the last quarter, in Q3, the performance level dropped from where we want it to be, and that related to the bulk lamp change or the routine maintenance, the cleansing, checking lamps, as similar to what John Monk outlined in the previous session. To counteract that, we've brought in a subcontractor called Your Colour onto the contract, so they're now subcontracting to Balfour Beatty, and the catch-up work's going to start in next financial year, 22-23. Next improvement plan that we've got underway is PI 9. That's to do with drainage cleansing. Sadly, over the last 2 quarters, the subcontractor ACL have gone into liquidation, so that company now ceases to exist. So Balfour Beatty have stepped in and retained 3 of the tankers and crews on contract, and they're working out of Sleaford. But it is, as I say, it's been a challenging environment for some of these supply chain partners. Lincolnshire County Council did do everything they could to retain that contractor and work with them, working with cash flow, trying to help alleviate those problems. But sadly, that business has now ceased to exist. The other 2 items that we're working on are the contract notifications. So within our day-to-day working, we're issuing early warnings and compensation events. Those 2 indicators for both the Highway Works contract and professional services contract have had some training sessions, both internally and externally, and we're expecting that indicator to increase in the next quarter. So I'll just run through some of the contract-specific updates. They're the numbers I've just reported there are mainly related to the performance statistics, but I'll go through them one by one now. So if I move to point 3.3, which is the Highway Works term service contract, which is Balfour Beatty. In Q3 of 2022, the Highways Works contract repaired somewhere in the region of 10,500 faults, including 8,946 carriageway potholes. And during the 3rd quarter, we completed 11 miles of carriageway patching and surfacing and 11 miles of footway reconstruction and cleansed 31,000 gullies. And that was during the phase when the subcontractor was sort of starting to have issues in terms of deliverability. I've added a new section into the report, which I think will be good for a discussion today, was item 3.3.2, which is challenges and improvements. So as sort of indicative, at the start of this report, I outlined that the construction sector continues to be extremely challenging, and it's mainly due to material prices, inflation, skill shortages, COVID-19, supply chain disruption due to hampering delivery. It's worth the committee knowing that the inflation within the highway works contracts means that our prices are likely to be 13% higher in April 22 than they were in April 2021. That's just the impact of that is what we can deliver to the residents of Lincolnshire, given the budget that we've got, which is sort of, it does get constrained by the DFT. And sadly, even though I've reported a number of 13% there, in the last month alone, since drafting this report, that's moved up to probably about 16 to 17%. So that's the sort of the impact, our buying power on the contract. The impact of rapidly increasing oil and energy prices used in the production of fuel, tarmac and bitumen is adding the additional cost pressures beyond inflationary mechanisms built into the contract. So one of the main areas of the focus, as outlined in the improvement plan, is the reactive service. We've implemented new scheduling hubs in the north and south of the county, and that's to get the co-location of the schedulers near the operatives and the gangs. We're seeing some improvements there, but there's still more to be done, in honesty. We will ensure that works are scheduled in the most efficient way, and then additional resources that have recently been introduced into the contract to ensure that the volume of work can be delivered. To tackle some of the inflationary pressures that we've discussed above, we are looking at increasing our recycling on the contract, and that removes an element of reliance on traditional asphalt material availability. At the moment, we're finding batching plants within the county are unable to set pricing over significant periods and give us that confidence. Those batching plants now are moving to daily prices, so it's quite a challenging time at the moment. So if I move now on to item 3.4.1, which is the professional services WSP contract. One of the main challenges for that contract is the recruitment of specialist roles. That's within the engineering sector, and that's the ability to attract good engineers, street lighting and drainage being some of the most difficult areas. And that's probably to do with the construction sector doing work so well nationally with High Speed 2 and the Viking Link within Lincolnshire. The final partner to the term service contract is Colas, which deliver the traffic signals. For Q3, we had 71 emergency faults. 69 of those were attended in time. Of the 413 standard faults, 100% of those were attended in time. So that's a really good level of service that's been offered there. Within the last quarter, Harmeston Crossroads were completed, Wharf Road in Grantham, and some of the commissioning and fine tuning of the Holdingham roundabout was completed in that quarter as well. I'll move now on to item number 4, NHT Public Satisfaction Survey. So this is a report we normally bring annually to the committee for discussion. A copy of the NHT Public Satisfaction Survey 2021 can be found in Appendix C. The content of the report gives a general overview of the authority's position in relation to where Lincolnshire highways stand against last year's results. And it's possible to analyse the data in individual service areas for geographical locations. So Lincolnshire Highways are currently investigating a number of opportunities to improve its NHT public satisfaction. Improvement work will focus on the communication improvements with our digital reporting platform, Fix My Street, which is our front-end software solution, and also the generation of a communications calendar that is focused on seasonal activity and service delivery improvements. It was worth noting to the committee that the NHT Public Satisfaction Survey identifies or helps identify what's important to our residents. Not that I don't think you need telling. Obviously, that the top one for highways was road condition and the safety of the roads. And sadly, the satisfaction in those areas are the lowest. So those two things go together. The final section of the report that I'm outlining today is the complaints. So a copy of the Highways Complaints Q3 report can be found in Appendix D. During Q3, the Highway Service received a total of 18,000 contacts, with 115 of those entering the formal complaints process, which is approximately 0.64%. The number of complaints entering the formal process has seen a 25% decrease in comparison to the previous quarter. So that's a positive direction of travel. The largest theme in relation to complaints related to repairs, and the reasons for the complaints was the delay in the service. So there's again some aspects to consider there. So in conclusion, the external verification of the highway service, there's improvements to be made. I think some of the improvement plans shows you or demonstrates that we're looking to do that ourselves and working with our partners. We do remain or seek peer assessment from external bodies. That was done recently with the Future Highway Research Group, Cranfield University, where they consider Lincolnshire highways as being set up correctly and working well. And that's positive that we're getting that outside view. Inflation pressures and key risks outlined within this report are impacting the delivery of service, not least the challenge around materials and resources, which is making some of these improvements more difficult to achieve. So that concludes my presentation. So I'll hand back over to the chairman.
Thank you, Jonathan. We now open it up for questions from committee. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Jonathan, I've got 3 questions. Under 3.32, challenges. Looking forward, when will the cut the government's imposed on the highways of 12.5 million come in? How will it affect this section? And I'm a little bit surprised the authority doesn't see this cut as a challenge. Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so in terms of the 12.3 million that the DFT were unable to award us for this financial year, the DFT have also confirmed that funding regime is likely to remain static now for the next 3 years. So thankfully, Lincolnshire County Council stepped in and met the 12.3 as a 1-year issue to resolve this financial year, which is fantastic. However, going forward, it does create a sort of a gap in funding to where the service requirements need to what's happening on the ground. So it's a concern, and with the inflation figures that I've suggested in the report, that what we can actually do with that money is getting more and more of a challenge.
Second question is about Red Line Square in Stamford. Basically, has a dispute been settled with either sets or tarmac? Because we sat through a highways meeting previously and agreed that sets would be put in, but then you hear the locals want tarmac.
I'm going to have to take that one away, sorry, councillor. I don't know the answer to that, but I can speak to my colleagues today and come back. But in terms of that discussion, it's a very valid one in terms of sets. It's obviously the appearance, the visual appearance of the Stamford Square there is key to the residents. However, in terms of maintenance, you can understand the reasoning and the rationale for requesting asphalt, and that's to do with maintenance long term. So I can give you an answer later today if that's okay.
The last one's got to do with public transport, and it mentions public transport on page 74. I just want information really that if a complaint comes in relating to buses and the complaint goes to the bus company, is that then passed on to the authority? How do we gauge how many complaints are actually made against bus companies? Do they share the information? I know, it's been on that the bus companies do receive money off the county council for routes that aren't profitable, but we never quite hear about the routes that are profitable, do we? Thank you.
I believe, but I will confirm this, that the complaints that we've got in that complaints report are direct with LCC. So they're the ones that are entering the formal complaints process. I believe the ones that go direct to the bus companies, they'll be interacting with them themselves. So unless either the bus company or the resident raise it with us directly, they won't be in those numbers.
Thank you. Councillor Dyer.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Jonathan, for your comprehensive report. Just a few questions, if I may. 3.3.2 within the report, you highlight the challenges facing our highway maintenance financially, and I think you specifically highlight the 13% increase in costs since last April, and that is of course concerning. And of course, with inflation continuing the way it is, who knows where that percentage will be next year. And within the report, you highlight to combat those financial challenges, you propose to increase the volume of recycling within that contract. So therefore, how will this impact our increased costs? And within the report, you highlight the positives of doing this, but are there actually any drawbacks to this, either by quality on the road or the time it takes? And just one last one on that point, if I may, if this is such a good way moving forward to recycle our leftovers, why wasn't it done previously? That'd be my question on those points. And on page 31 of the report, there is something concerning regarding the decrease in apprentices working on the contract. I'd just be curious to know, I don't know if you have the figures to hand, how many apprentices we do have now and where that figure should be, and what are the contractors doing to ensure that we get those apprentice numbers back up to where they should be. And within the report as well, you identify that there's been 10,500-ish faults repaired. Do you know how many of those faults have been proper saw cut repairs rather than, I suppose, cowpat repairs, as some of my residents refer to them as? Also, I don't think there is a performance indicator within here, but one thing that has been rolled out recently is the Highways app for members, and I do like that app. I do use it regularly, but obviously since Christmas it has been buggy. Are there any performance indicators on that app, and is there a plan to resolve that app moving forward? And finally, Mr. Chairman, representing North Highcombe, it has very fertile soil. My part of North Highcombe does, and the grass verges do tend to grow quite quickly, especially at this time of year. And it's okay at the moment, but last year they did grow significantly, and many residents did complain about that. And I note within the report there is contractor flexibility to respond to issues like that, where the grass grows to ridiculous heights. I'd just be curious to know, how do you monitor that contractor flexibility? Because if the problem happens, I'm sure I'll complain about it, and I'm sure Councillor Rowe will as well, and other members. So I just want to know how that's recorded and how we monitor contractors on responding to individual concerns. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. So I'll try and run those in the order that they came. For the foam-based position, which is what we call recycling on the contract, we have increased that. We're starting to increase a campaign of that as a standard approach. Over the last 5-6 years, we've done sort of campaigns or trials where we bring in sort of an external batching plant where we reuse the planings that come from the highway. So when we're doing a larger scheme, we'll take the planings to a depot or stockpile, and we are turning it into what's called cold recycle bound material. So that's different to the traditional asphalt plants, which is a hot mix. The benefits of that obviously is that it's the energy uses at those batching plants are far lower. So in terms of why that's sort of a combating the inflationary measures, is that the biggest issues at the moment is those increases in oil prices and energy prices. So this is becoming more economical for us in smaller volumes. So that's one of the that's why we're looking at it more and more. You raise a really good point in terms of the whole life costing. So we've been quite cautious with it as an authority in the past. We're only selecting the right sites. So we're across Lincolnshire, we've got some difficult ground conditions. We have a number of areas that are called drought damaged areas where the peat and underlying soils undulate. This solution, foam-based recycling, isn't going to be useful there. It's going to be at appropriate sites. And the risk is that we try and use this too much. So we're very cautious of that. And obviously, by putting in a recycled material, we need the confidence that it's going to last the 10 or 15 years that we desire out of that pavement design. So we're really cautious of it. The reason it hasn't been done in the past, I think it's working with our supply chain partners. What we've done with Balfour Beatty recently is set up a compound in the north and south of the county where we are investing in this development. So we're going to have a temporary weighbridge and stockpile storage bays to process and grade this material. We've done elements of it in the past, but I think now it's becoming financially viable to do this more than it ever has been. So again, you're right to say why the risk is that we overuse this, and if it's not the right site location, the whole life costing could be an issue. But that's why we're training the staff at the moment, going out and working with the supply chain. So in terms of the apprentices, so the reason why we're not scoring as high there is because we didn't hit our internal target. The apprentice numbers for next financial year is for Balfour Beatty to have 6 apprentices on contract, WSP to have 2, and Colas to have 1. So 9 in total we're looking for from our supply chain partners. We believe that's achievable with the volume of work that we're putting through the contract. And I think last year we didn't hit that number. So whilst we've probably got 8 or 7, we didn't hit the 9 target, and that's why that performance indicator is scoring less. It's not that we don't have any, and we are ourselves as an employer and those partners are looking to encourage that more and more going forward, and it helps us with that skills piece that we're struggling longer term. So we've identified this ourselves, and we think that the best places to grow our own ultimately in Lincolnshire, get them working for the authority, get them involved into science, engineering, technology. So we're engaging with the schools, working with local partners to try and encourage people into engineering. So that's something that we're doing at the moment to actively try and address that. In terms of faults, you mentioned the saw cut repairs and cowpats. We've got approximately 85% of our fault repairs now are saw cuts. We're always trying to improve that. We've got that data coming through live at the moment in terms of what we in our contract we call it a Series 6300, and we have an option A and an option B. What we are looking to do is use that more and more. And the reason sometimes when we don't use a saw cut solution is that we sort of are doing a fault repair and the surrounding pavement isn't in a good enough position to make a long lasting solution. And we know that a scheme is already in the programme. So sometimes it isn't worth it doesn't offer value for money to do an excellent repair when there's a temporary one with a scheme coming up in the future. So that's sometimes why it's not 100%, but it's increased over the last couple of years. 85, I believe it's 85%. Maybe 90 is our ultimate goal there, but I don't think it ever wants to be 100%, if that makes sense. In terms of the Highways app, so that was something that Balfour Beatty brought with this contract as a quality commitment. We've been, as you know, circulating information through there in terms of the fault repairs that have planned in the weeks coming and the weeks just gone by. We've got some technicalities with the developer of that software. We've raised concerns with them. It's got some glitches, and we're working to relaunch that in the coming weeks. Balfour Beatty have also taken it on board to develop their own software as well for a longer term solution. So at the moment we're reliant on a third party working for Balfour Beatty, and the technical issues are with that sort of contract. So there are plans underway. We think it's really useful for you guys, and we're keen to get it sorted. I just can't offer a timescale just yet, sadly. Final one, I think, was the Verges. In terms of our policy, we cut our Verges 3 times per annum. That's what we publish. However, we do react to safety and visibility issues at junctions, and that's done by our cyclical team. So they're reported by either members of the public through our fault reporting platform, and we'll respond to that as in a timely manner. Ultimately, they will feed into the overarching response times, but in terms of they're one of the 10,000 faults of different types, so they will feature, and I can get you specific data if there is problems in any area and any part of the members today.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I would just add for the Highways app, whilst it is down and obviously not ideal at the moment, I am very thankful that we as councillors do still get an email every week with an update on what's happening in our divisions. So thank you for that. I would just like now to invite Verity Druce, Head of Transformation, to speak on Microsoft Teams to answer a question that Councillor Clark made earlier. Thank you.
So I just wanted to clarify a point around complaints regarding bus companies and bus routes, etc. So my role is Head of Transformation for Transport. So working under Assistant Director Nicole Hilton in Communities, sharing the head of service role for Transport Services Group at the moment. And one of the things we're intending to do is come to this this meeting with a quarterly report regarding transport services, which would incorporate all aspects around complaints, issues, progress on our transformation programme. And one of the things I wanted to just confirm was what Jonathan had said regarding the figures that are in those complaints, but also the fact that we do work very closely with our bus operators. So we have a partnership approach to complaints that come through to them directly. And we will start to build on that increasingly, and we can look to incorporate some of that information and narrative into the future reporting. And if anybody has got any questions regarding transport, then I'm available.
Thank you, Verity. Councillor Rawlins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Councillor Dyer stole my thunder regarding the cost of the recycling of materials. But on a practical level, Jonathan, what does that really mean in terms of our recycling? Is it old road planings or just additional tarmac? Obviously, because it only, one presumes when it's mixed, it only has a certain useful life. And I understood some years ago that the road planings had to go into landfill because of environmental concerns. Thank you.
Yes, so in terms of the recycling of what we call asphalt waste containing coal tar, they are deemed as a hazardous waste. We deal with them in line with what the Environment Agency suggest as a suitable treatment type, and that is when we encapsulate it in cement and we use it back into the network. That satisfies that element. So it helps avoid taking this waste to a landfill, and that's from a highway service, that's the worst case scenario. The aggregate fundamentally has a design life. However, reusing it in this way is, in terms of whole life costing, is well within acceptable limits. In terms of the sort of tonnages that we're looking at longer term, this is probably 40,000 tons of material that we're avoiding going to landfill, and the nature of hauling materials from quarries around the country, because we don't have any suitable within Lincolnshire, we're dramatically reducing the carbon footprint of that work, that element of work going in, and also avoiding some of the hot material and energy prices going into the batching plants. So whilst I've outlined this as we're trying to tackle these inflationary pressures, this doesn't resolve them. So this is an element of what we're trying to do. The budgetary figures in terms of the overarching DFT capital position at the moment, as it would appear for the next 3 years, that there's no inflationary element built into those DFT funding. So whilst the service is costing 13% more, the funding that the highway services is remain is static. So what we're doing here is trying to alleviate what we can. I still think there is a fundamental issue in terms of what the highway service can offer going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Oh, sorry, did you want to come back on that?
I was just saying, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Jonathan for that. But clearly, the inflationary pressures are far more than 13%, and it's not going to get any easier. If the funding isn't coming through central government, there's only one option, isn't there? Effectively, and that's going to be we'll have to cut a cloth according to what we've got. The funding is just not going to keep pace with inflation unless we have some dramatic change in taxation policy and those sort of things.
Yep. So I mean, internally with our supply chain partners, we're working hard to. There's obviously some elements of efficiency we can get out of the service. I think we're talking a percentage there. We're not talking this sort of gap. We are looking at different treatment types, different options. The discussion that was held earlier in relation to the street lighting energy costs. That is an element that ultimately helps the financial position of the highway service. And then in the background as well, we are looking to try and increase any income streams that the highway service can generate. So we are trying to, where possible, help ourselves. We've got a paper that, as we've got the Scrutiny, the paper in September, October, I believe, that we're bringing back our strategy for the highway service, and ultimately what we set out in the strategy in terms of our response times and our service levels, like in terms of the grass cutting requirements. That's outlined in that document, and it'll set where we want to be going forward for the next strategy cycle, whether that's it's a 4-year cycle, whether we want to maintain a steady state, or is it sadly a gradual decline. So that discussion is on its way, and it'll be coming back to this group probably in September, October.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I too need to just thank Tom for asking the question about quality of repairs, and also for bringing up the bit about apprenticeships. But it's about apprenticeships and work experience I'd like to expand on. As chair of the corporate parenting panel, I know that Highways and our partners are working well with Andy Morris, head of the corporate parenting, to bring up all the opportunities for apprenticeships. But unfortunately, the majority of our cared for children, the apprenticeships aren't appropriate because of the government's requirements for the educational level to get into an apprenticeship. What is of more value, of more value to more of the children, is work experience opportunities. Do we have any formal conversations with our partners about work experience to give these children a chance, or young adults chance, to get a feel for work? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. With our supply chain partners, I know WSP actively encourage work experience, so they bring staff into the consultancy where they're able to get a feel for design and what we're doing on with our highway schemes. Balfour Beatty do the same thing across the service, so it's happening. We could do more of it, I think, in honesty, whether that's as LCC Highway Service themselves or our partners, and it's working with those schools, encouraging science, engineering, technology, getting them into engineering is something that we're trying to do more of. So I think it's something that we're doing, but we could do more of.
Mr. Chairman, could I just come in? I think a lot of it is more about lower levels of job where somebody might have a practical bent for something rather than an educational one. And if I could ask that, again, you just work with Andy Morris on that. I'm sure I'll enthusiastically get involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report. Looking at the report, not surprised that the road condition is the most important, or voted most important by residents, and is also the least on the satisfied one as well. That seems concurrent with what I hear when out talking with residents. I'm happy to hear that saw cut is becoming more of the regular, the normal, which is good to hear. One thing that does infuriate the residents that I speak to is they see the contractors turn up to fix a pothole, and when they ask them, are you doing the one on the same road? They're told, sorry, we're not allowed to, we've not been asked to, and then maybe turn up another week or two later to do that pothole. Is there any way we can move to some sort of mechanism where these contractors, I spoke to them myself, and they feel it themselves, they would like to be able to do anything else on the road. I believe they take photos when they turn up and they take photos after they've done. Is there any mechanism where we can move where they can take photos of another pothole, fix it, and move to a mechanism where that can happen, please?
Yep, good point. It's something that we are aware of, and we know it's a challenge from the public. In terms of our contractors working on the network, which is Balfour Beatty, in 95% of the time, or it's a subcontractor working for them. We raise jobs through what we call Series 6300 of the contract, where we will request a fault is completed in line with our high amp or our policy response times. Within the contract, we've got a capacity for the contractor to self-identify works within. I think we discussed it with this scrutiny committee a number of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, where they've got 30 meters either way on the network to self-identify and fix those faults. So they take their own photo and they'd report that back, fix it. And that's so that our officers get a feel for the quality for those ones that haven't requested and they're completed. I think what we're seeing is possibly the resourcing issues that identified in some of the challenges at the moment. So the contractors are at capacity in terms of their scheduled work through the day, and sometimes the gang the ones you spoke to probably are talking in reference to their agent working back in the office. They haven't been given that float in their program to do that work. So they're sort of back to back hitting those jobs. What we need to try and get to is a position where we've got additional resource on the contract to pick up those works. It's set up to do it. It's just not happening yet. So I think that's something I'll take away from today and try and report back on in the future, if that's okay. But it is something that we are actively working on. And in terms of the another scenario that sometimes happen is in terms of our policy and our response times, there's areas that need a 7-day response time due to the hierarchy and the depth of intervention. There'll be some on that network that are planned, and sometimes those work elements can go different routes. It allows the gang to be more efficient for the ones that are planned, but yet for the reactive ones, it just means that they can get to that fault and fix it in line with our policy to try and reduce the insurance claims. So sometimes it stacks up and it works. That is the most efficient thing. But what we need to build in is that capacity for those contractor identified faults. And that's something we're working on with Balfour Beatty. So it's there to do. We just probably haven't got the resource at the moment to self-identify and pick them up. But I can understand the frustrations from yourself and the members of the public.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. Start with a positive. It's early days, but the current pothole repairs look brilliant, and we just hope that they last. I'm very impressed by the ones that we've been waiting for a long time, and they've happened at last. So, that's good. My concern is something raised by residents. I'm not referring to the incident in Curtin. I'm referring to other incidents where there are road closures and something starts, but then nothing happens for a long time. And they nearly always seem to be in relation to Anglian water. Now, I'm speculating, is it because they have to come in and do an emergency response because it's a burst water main somewhere, but then having partly sort of ease the pressure, they then go off and do something else. But I can think of 3 different incidents around my division in recent years where this has happened. But I'm not concerned with the major works in Curtin where the road was closed and residents thought that nothing was happening. It's just these Anglian water ones. Okay, thank you.
So in terms of those works, obviously, as a highways authority, we're not directly responsible for it. But however, our streetworks and permitting team can get involved with those arrangements and make sure that the works is that we have capacity or the flow of traffic on the network. And we're only at those sites when we need to be. So I'm more than happy to speak offline and try and understand what's happened in those scenarios. A potential one could be, as you say, an emergency closure, but you'd expect the work crew to follow up in shortly after. What sometimes happen is with businesses of this type, they have a separate traffic management a TM gang separately to the main works gang. So it could be that it's the availability of that gang set up the road closure and the works crew will follow on in the coming days. But that the timescale should be happening there and then. So that's something for us to have a look at, and I'll have a chat with my streetworks and permitting team.
I mean, I can confess that I have slightly moved a road closure sign on occasion, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who's done that when it's perfectly safe for traffic to be using that bit of road.
Yeah, thank you. So Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman. My comment relates to the NHT Public Satisfaction Survey. Broadly, I note the return rates considered to be good, which is great, but I am concerned about the demographic breakdown of the surveys returned. Nearly 53% of the surveys returned were from people over the age of 65, which isn't really reflective of the population, especially considering the survey is, and I quote, designed to represent a spread of customers' views of service geographically by gender and age. What additional measures can we take to try and increase engagement amongst other age groups?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. The NHT survey goes out to they're of the respondees, so that they are trying to target all of the demographic groups by I would suspect population. We get a better response rate from that demographic group. What we could do more, and I think the communications team we're working with at the moment in trying to address the NHT improvement plan is actively seek or pursue comms with those channels or those parties that we need to. So that's going to be better work through the social media campaigns. We're trying to give out seasonal information related to the actual work activity that we're doing and push information out more willingly, I guess. That's something that we're trying to do through a comms calendar at the moment. But we're more than happy to take suggestions of other ways to get to those parties, because we want to influence them as well, and we want to understand their views of what's important to them in the highway service.
Thank you. Councillor Sear.
Thank you. I got a couple questions to ask. Thank you, Councillor Gibson asked about the pothole. Tom Dyer asked about Cottonbird. Now, how you measure how many pothole you can fit in before you can put the new road in, new surface? And how big is a pothole it is for damage the main road before you can decide it they can do with new surface? And other thing is that whatever app you on about, I never get it. Everybody try for me, and apparently they ain't got any password. Executive Richard David try it. Some people in the council house try it. I never got it. So I don't know. So lucky everybody got it, you know, but and other subject is how far the damage on the road before how many times you come out to do survey, right? To do like inspection before you decided. And who make decision to choose the road down? Because I was travel twice last week to King's Lynn. And they should that A17 that brake shouldn't be in there. They do repaint in the brake, yeah. 2 miles long on traffic, and more lorry go through there. I was in there for 2 hours, and I go past it. Only one man working. He didn't working. He pay on his phone. I want to know how long you decided to shoot the busy time, Easter weekend, to close the road down. You have 18 months of COVID where nobody on the road. So I don't know how that decision is made. Another thing is, if you can send me the detail about who puts in the word, it's a town council or county. I got elected last year and I got no answer, bombarded. Nobody respond. Who puts in the word? I went out and do myself. So if you can find out for me, I know they say you to be called payback scheme to do some parts of what town council not do, or eat, or we not do it, you know. And I asked, and they say the county took away the payback scheme. So I live in, well, I represent Mablethorpe. It's a tulip holiday, and it looked shocking. You know, you talk about not I came the gas going loud. I have a netco going near the bus stop, and people complain. So if you can contact me, good job I come today. No, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sear. I'll try and run through them in order again, but I will promise to contact you after this this session just to understand them in more detail. But in terms of the actual response to a pothole size, that's dealt with relative to the issue. We have a number of, or a variety of solutions within the contracts, ranging from, you know, just infilling a very small hole, 10 centimetres by 10 centimetres, up to 30, 40 metres squared. We can do them reactive within the contract to meet our high amp response times, but we're also considering, when we do the reactive fix, that's not really the best long-term solution. Where we want to be is preventative maintenance. So that's surface dressing, doing larger schemes on the network to reduce the highway service becoming more reactive. Sadly, linked to that sort of discussion earlier in terms of funding, if the highway service isn't funded where it needs to be, and the network in terms of our condition declines over time, the service becomes more responsive, and that's not the best thing ultimately for the residents of Lincolnshire, because we want our network to be in a good condition. So in terms of the actual fix to a job, we've got a variety of solutions available to us. And the decision in terms of the number of revisits to a site, the condition of the network, we're monitoring that through our laboratory. So we've got a laboratory in Lincolnshire. We're one of the few authorities to retain that. The work crews will be going out on the network. The hierarchies 1, 2, and 3 they'll be doing regularly. The lower hierarchies they'll be probably going round to them once every 4 years. We're doing a thing called scanner and course visit inspection, where those networks are surveyed on a continuous cycle, and it's that information that feeds our longer term schemes that alleviate the problems of the network. The faults are just our day-to-day responses. In terms of the councillor app, apologies if you haven't been set up correctly yet. We'll make sure that's done. Just bear with us, though, as Councillor Dyer suggested, there are some issues with it at the moment. But I know I've got a councillor login just to see what you guys are seeing. So there are some issues with it, and we're aware of them. But we'll make sure in the short term we'll at least get you set up. But I know our officers are sending information on a weekly basis now, which you would be getting through that app. In terms of Cross Keys Swing Bridge, sadly the painting, the cycles, the maintenance of these structures come around every now and then. This one's the painting is due to last for 20 years, so we don't intend to do this at busy periods. However, for the length of the schemes, it normally overlaps a busy period, whether that's Easter or summer holidays or Christmas. That we always clash with something, sadly. So it's I take it on board. We do want to keep the network open as much as possible, but sadly, due to the right thing actually, in terms of safety of the workforce, we need to reduce the running lanes down to 1 across Cross Keys Swing Bridge, and the diversion's in place. But yeah, apologies that it does impact yourself and the members of the public. And I've got the other one was to contact you after this meeting. Okay,
thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. Just well, first of all, say that on the Anglian Water and street works, I've got a constituent of mine who regularly sends me photographs of sites, and they're always Anglian Water, I'm afraid, where there's roadworks, guarding and traffic management there, and apparently nothing going on. And I've forwarded them to the Streetworks and Permanenting team, and I've had reports back, and they do take action, and in the way of fines and things like that. So it is worth feeding it through, but it is annoying that we can't get Anglian Water really to come into line and start managing things better. But I do think it's what you say about the traffic. They have separate traffic management contractors, and it's set it up this day and take it all down that day. And if they're finished earlier, they just stay, the traffic management just stays in place until the original completion date or whatever. And the other thing is on page 14, we've got the Alliance partners managed to achieve their targets for quarter 2. The results per contract area are, and we've got the scores achieved. Now, I can see on the PIs, the end of some are up and some are down, but I don't know what that overall target is for each of those, for the highways works term contract. So I've got a score, but I don't know what the target was to compare it against. And I wondered if we could have that information in future, the overall target, please. But thank you for the report. And the NHT satisfaction survey, that's always to me a sort of frustration, because trying to get it to improve seems to be very difficult. And I mean, we always seem to come up with these communication action points, but I've yet to see it, those communication improvements lead to an improvement in the survey results. So I don't know what the answer is. If you want.
Yeah, in terms of the targets, I think we're probably using the incorrect terminology within the report. I'll look at that next time. But in terms of the performance scores, they do map out to mean something. So normally a level of a score of 4 and below might mean that we need to implement an improvement plan, or we implement what's called as low service damages within that contract. We've also got sort of indicative levels of good, average or excellent. It's probably worth me sharing within that report just to give you a bit of a benchmark of where that scoring means against the criteria. So we'll make sure that's added to the next scrutiny report.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. Okay, so thank you for questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I move that the committee endorses this and that we are satisfied with the overall performance reported, and that our comments and recommendations as recorded are fed back to the Executive Council for his consideration. Does anyone dissent? No. Thank you. That is carried. Moving on to item 7 of the agenda, the committee work programme. This item is on pages 91 to 94 of the agenda pack. This item enables the committee to comment on the content of our work programme. The report will be presented by Chiara, our scrutiny officer. Our actions are to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. Over to you, Chiara.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. There's no further amendments to the work programme as it stands. Please do come back to me with your suggestions on items to be included or considered for the next council term, and we will take them under consideration. Happy to take any questions. Councillor Rowe.
Yeah, thank you very much. When I first came on to highways, we had a real good session about how we do repairs and how we check roads out. And we also had a visit to the laboratory, which has helped me all the way through. So I've sat on this committee since I joined. It was first class and it helps. I would like to suggest that we certainly look at that for the members of this committee, and if numbers allow, open it up to other councillors, because I think it will help them on their normal duties, as highways is obviously a major factor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rowe. Happy to take that under consideration and see if we can establish a date that we can have a visit. Thank you.
Any further questions? No, so thank you. I move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 91 to 94. Does anyone dissent? If so, please indicate now. Thank you. Before we finish, I would like to rectify my omission at the beginning of this meeting and welcome the newest member of our committee, Councillor Mrs. Vernon. Welcome on board and look forward to working with you. Thank you. So that now concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you for everyone for attending. Thank you.